Hey everybody, welcome back to Spiritual Devil, where today is Saturday, September the 10th, and it is National Suicide Prevention Day. And the reason that I wanted to talk about this subject is partly because I, like many of you, look at the media feeds. And one of the major media feeds today posted that it was National Suicide Prevention Day. So there are all kinds of days probably throughout the year that I've seen headlines for. Like, for an example, maybe National Cup of Coffee Day or something like that. Many of these things are just topics, icebreakers. However, on this particular day, because of the fact that I received that headline, and because I've chosen to leave my phone off, because I've left my phone off, I have encountered some interesting situations. Now, me and one other person in the world knows that somebody contacted me not long ago because they thought that I was saying something that led to the belief that I may no longer be here because I was going to choose myself to end my duration of time that I had available to spend. So, because of this miscommunication, and in addition to all of the miscommunications that have been occurring within my group, possibly including some of you who are following this page who have no idea what you're watching. What are you getting into when you're subscribing to this guy? What am I getting into? Am I getting into something where this guy is talking about holistic, healthy, enjoyable, pleasant things? Or am I signing up to hear some other nut job who's talking about anger and retaliation and what we shouldn't do and shouldn't be doing? Just because there are things that need to be corrected doesn't mean that every correction is tied to or should be tied to a negative association. So, if, for an example, I want to replenish my health and I want to have more time to do the things that I'm doing, then I need to trade something else. And so in some cases, that's trading the opportunity to be regularly available, especially if people aren't going to give you any consideration. Let's just say, for an example, and this is going to be the simplest example. I apologize to my parents. This is not being said to dishonor my parents. But let's just say that I were to be talking with someone and they were to get a little bit short, a little bit impatient with me, an only child who has the most reason to be impatient, because I've never had to wait on any siblings or anyone for that matter. In this era, I haven't even had to be a waiter. I haven't had to be in the wait staff. I have not really done much for anyone in terms of the service industry. And at the same time, I'm cleaning up after quite a few people who are not my children, who are not my relatives. And let's just say that I was telling something like this to one of my direct relatives, and my direct relative started to get angry from that topic. because of a discomfort that they were feeling. In that instance, I refused the assault, the verbal assault. I explained that there was no need to be upset, and I suggested that some emotion was causing the inability to have a conversation, and we've gotten to this point before many, many times, and so we've wasted a lot of time getting to this point in the conversation. And this person got really agitated and said something along the lines of, "What does that have to do with the price?" And the way one of my relatives used to say it is, "What does that have to do with the price of rice in China?" The reason that that saying was anything that I just am explaining to you is not a racially charged saying. It's just simply, well, what is this subject about picking up trash after all the people here have to do with the price of rice in China? Really, they're unrelated. I'll give you that. And at the same time, I'll also reiterate that we'd had this conversation before. And what I'm trying to discuss is, how as a nation do we talk a little bit further past the roadblocks? How do we talk past the roadblocks if we don't learn to sing a new tune that talks about something joyful and prosperous and successful and healthy? How do we do that? So anyway, so I'm having this conversation where I'm saying this person is becoming agitated. Again, I'm trying to tell you, I'm not trying to misrepresent my parents. Honor thy parents is something that I absolutely respect. And in this example, when this person got agitated, I asked them, well, and I'm just going to say it, the way that it comes out. There's so many different subtexts and contexts and everything that this can be taken in, but this is important that you take it in. If you're trying to understand how to come to terms with peace, how to have a conversation, just hear me out. So I asked this person, I said, well, here, just as an example of things that you're not hearing because you're so tuned out, and again, this is one of my parents. I said, if this is true, that you're hearing everything and you're understanding everything and remembering everything, and this person doesn't have dementia. I said, if you're hearing all of these things and you understand all these things, can you tell me the name of my wife? They were dumbfounded because they couldn't. In some cases, I've talked about the date that I was married on, which is directly associated to ritualistic holidays on October 31st. Some people have continuously tried to schedule things on dates where I probably would be spending that time with my best friend. This is really just the way it is. My best friend, what's their name? What's this person's name who you're married to? What is the birth date of this person who you're in contact with? Do you know who you're talking with? Recently on this channel itself, I shared an anomaly with the wildlife, the bears in Big Bend, an anomaly that was occurring because of drought-related circumstances. What does that have to do with the price of rice in wherever? It has a lot to do with what we are talking about right now. This subject material is using parables, examples. It's reflecting on current and past time frames, mistakes that have been made, and it's talking about perseverance. In no instance that I've been talking about all these daunting tasks, people burning the house down, inheritances being stolen away by politicians, tax refunds still in limbo, things being repaired since last year. In no case have I suggested that any of this is related to the price of rice in any place. Yesterday was a galvanizing day. A lot of people saw the same media yesterday that occurred. And our hearts go out for everything terrible that happened yesterday. Today is September 10th. Tomorrow, many years back, we had another terrible incident happen where, believe it or not, there were 3 towers that fell in New York. Look up WTC 7, World Trade Center 7. There were 3 towers that fell down because of the atrocities that happened, the terrorist acts that happened, where volumes were published about some of the incidents that happened, explaining how the burning hot jet fuel caused the framework of these buildings to collapse. 2 of them anyway. The 3rd tower is often forgotten. Suicide Prevention Day, National Suicide Prevention Day. Many things, many people are forgotten. I don't forget the people with whom I have enjoyed these journeys. I have had direct contact with people who committed murder and then suicide just days after we talked in person together. I would wager, if I were a betting person, gambling with life, I would wager that it's not just the price of rice in some place that is exponentially worth considering paying attention to. It might also be the details, the consideration that we give to one another. And I'm very cautious when I say things like that because there are sayings such as, the devil is in the details. Well, maybe that's why I like this shirt. The devil is in the details, you know? The devil is in the details of learning to not turn from a channel just because we think that it might be challenging to hear. Not to turn from a channel because we think someone is being petulant. What if all of these things I'm talking about, I recognize hardly any of us care about, except for there are people who care about this, especially people who are going through the same or similar circumstances. I know people directly who have had family try to steal the house they live in from them, even though they had their own house. And I also know that our internal service that deals with revenue is holding some of my money, but probably not in a malicious, on-purpose way. It's possible that our work volumes and our experienced workers are taking a well-earned break by turning their phones off. It's possible that they haven't yet done that, but many of them should do that. Today I carried the remote control to turn off this fan that keeps turning on at random intervals right now. It almost always just does it when I try to record a video, and it drives me nuts because there's at least one viewer on here that talks about the shadows that are thrown by the overhead fan, and that's why I've talked about that in some of these clips. I'm not a professional production person trying to give to you some kind of award-winning video that goes with some of these music videos that, frankly, to me are award-winning, at least to me. I love hearing them, especially as I get myself in shape. As you watch what I've traded for what I'm receiving, this is just a journey that you can evaluate on your own. And the beauty of this is you don't have to do it publicly. The reason I ask for people to share some of these concepts is because maybe I have experience with people who were on the brink and who did go so far as to commit suicide. Maybe that experience is worth considering. Maybe the experience of observing bears gathering in a national campground in unnatural ways and trying to talk with authorities about it is something we should be considering. Maybe when somebody's direct relative goes outside without their shirt, waving it over their head, yelling crazy things. Maybe when that parent goes to the neighbors with a screwdriver wanting to stab their neighbors. Maybe when we talk to authorities and there are no authorities, especially among people who can communicate well enough and without shame, because they're past shame, they know. We are all headed for the point of a decision. And our decision can be something we actively participate in regularly, like paying attention to one another. Or we can continue to perpetuate the loneliness, the shame, the anger, the intolerance. The truth will set you free, but it may imprison a lot of other people depending on whether we learn to forgive, especially as we're learning responsibility in the midst of people who have not taught it. All of the ability that we have to heal may simply come from actually being present. Some of us aren't present. If we're not present and we're just continuing to snap up all the advertised, consumer-driven, ritualistic solutions, we might be coming up a little short when it comes to how do we help one another out. You know, how do we help people innovate so that we don't have random breakdowns? How do we offset the trouble that we see? For me, it requires communication. And you don't have to be certified in anything. You don't even have to be certified as a crazy person in order to sell your property to relatives shortly after burning it down. You don't have to do hardly anything in this world to persist in the oblivious way that we have. You only have to put down the utensils and or the addictions that are in your hands right now. As I say these things, I think about it because sometimes I'm holding different things. Electronics, it's a big addiction. Knives, guitars. There are so many things that all of us have had the opportunity to collect, to amass. Do we use these things? Do we maintain them? How about our own self? Do we maintain our own selves? How can we maintain hardly anything around us if we ourselves are not maintained? These are the things that I'm talking about right now. And if anything is going to continue to get into my time frame and just continuously try to schedule things around dates where it's like, I'm not going to be available on this date. If they're going to continue to ask questions about something that they can read themselves. And if they're never going to reciprocate, that's an energy vampire. I've turned off my phone because I found a nest of vampires. Have any of you watched, what was that show? Supernatural. Supernatural was a great show that talked about things in a way that are almost sacrilegious to those who get offended easily. Like if you get offended that I'm saying there are things that are being sold in our corporations, even at our corporations that aren't being sold, like the promotional things that are given out to all of the entire fleet of employees with items, oftentimes made in some other place. What does it have to do with the price of rice anywhere? What it has to do with is resources and whether we appreciate them and use them with responsibility or not. One of the big topics recently was something about Roe versus Wade. In that controversial topic are so many different arguments, but the biggest argument that I can always put forth is not even an argument. It's more along the lines of, if every one of us were responsible enough to understand that having a relationship with somebody that goes beyond, regular communication can result in the creation of a life, would it not be acceptable to at least establish if we can become long-term friends before we take on those responsibilities or those attributes, those benefits with friends? If we haven't considered if we can be friends with one another, and if we haven't recognized that some of us who thought we could be friends with one another can't be because we're too angry, we're too venomous, then we might find ourselves trying to short a conversation. Me turning off the phone is not shorting a conversation. It is simply saying with a little bit more effort that the way I feel is the way that you feel. The way that I've been shorted is different from how you've been shorted. Some things that I take for granted, you may never take for granted, and vice versa. So when it comes down to it, even though my family lineage has been robbed, in the long run, it doesn't really matter. Because in addition to all of that, in addition to the vision I have where it's like there are these anomalies happening in nature where we know it's possible we're facing something daunting, in addition to all of that, this itself runs out. For a lot of you, you're going to be really happy because I'm about to have this video run out. I'd like to upload it like right away and get on with my day because I have a lot to do. And at the same time, I recognize National Suicide Prevention Day as something that is relevant. I am just a reflection. If I'm seeing people who want to and have committed suicide, Maybe I'm a reflection of all or many of the hurt people because I've had those thoughts in the past myself. My upbringing was not the most pleasant. However, it was not the most unpleasant. I had a great time growing up. I want you to understand, parents, if you're watching this, you understand that this video is because I honor you. And if you're watching this, parents out there in general, I mean this, not my own parents, all parents. If you're watching this and you have children with whom you have not been able to communicate, just remember, your children were children at some point, and so were you. It wasn't until the both of you became adults that you had difficulties communicating. So, you might want to try to think just a little bit in terms of whether or not the things you're learning are in the direction of truth, or if they're just a continuation of the same old errors over and over and over. Who am I to be talking with any of you with any authority? I'm a spiritual devil, that's all. I'm just like anyone else who has thought about the details just enough to go, even mischievously, even maliciously. What if this happens? What if this happens? We all know the difference. The difference is, do we know how to use a sharp instrument safely? Today, as part of the things that I've been meaning to do, but I didn't have the time for because I was just continuing these spinning the wheels conversations. One of the other things I did was sharpen a boatload of knives, kitchen knives. And it was using a sharpener that vastly improved the speed and efficiency and even the precision with which I sharpened these instruments. So I've been working on a lot of different things that bring me satisfaction, and also just a moderate amount of knowing that I have that awareness and control and perseverance to withstand some of the things that are occurring. Some of the things that scientists say will happen in the not too distant future are very overwhelmingly daunting, to the point where it's like, it may not matter just how amazingly prepared I am physically in this realm. It may not matter. I may still run into the same thing that we're all going to run into. It may not matter. What does matter is that while I am here, I want to bring everyone the best experience possible when they have an experience with me. And in order to do that, I need to let go of a lot of negative energy. I have to let go of the things where it's just a drain. It's a drain. We know the difference. So on these days, when people are feeling drained, instead of feeling so sad, like there's no one out there who would listen, dig deep. Listen to others. There are other people struggling just like you. The beautiful thing about learning to communicate with one another is that as these struggles become recognized, we learn to overcome those struggles. And there are people within our groups who have just enough knowledge, if not more so, than some of the people who are just collecting benefits. Setting fire to places that they didn't even earn. Setting fire to money that they didn't even earn. Setting fire to nations that they didn't even earn. Those are just my basic thoughts on this day that come from a topic so challenging. Because it is challenging. I do miss the people who I've lost to these types of options. Everything's an option, whether it's good or bad. I've also lost people to the options of improper decisions when it comes to nutrition. More than anything, though, out of every single loss that I've experienced, I've lost the most people in my life to the lack of communication. Till next time, thank you so much for watching. Peace, love, and all that old school stuff.